The signing ceremony took place in the same conference room where War Commander Grix had struck Ambassador Kim Tae-ho just 24 hours earlier. But everything had changed since then. The room was now filled with human military officers, their uniforms crisp and their faces wearing those same terrifyingly pleasant smiles. Grix sat at the table with his claws shaking as he held the ceremonial signing stylus. Around him, his own warriors looked like defeated animals. The proud Vorthak Empire, which had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy, had been brought to its knees without a single shot being fired. The document in front of Grix was written in simple, clear language that left no room for misunderstanding. Every term was exactly what Tae-ho had outlined the day before. Total surrender disguised as a cultural exchange program. War Commander, Tae-ho said gently, whenever you're ready. There's no rush. Admiral Bae Sungmin stood beside him, occasionally checking reports from the human fleet that now surrounded every major Vorthak installation. The reports were all the same. Total cooperation from Vorthak forces who had suddenly become very interested in peaceful cultural exchange. Park So-jin was busy coordinating the release of human prisoners from Vorthak territory. The process was going remarkably smoothly, with Vorthak commanders falling over themselves to comply with human requests. Captain Lee Do-hyun monitored communications from Commander Oh Ji-won's stealth teams. The teams were still moving freely through Vorthak space, now openly revealing themselves to stunned alien crews who had never realized they were being watched. The cultural education program is proceeding excellently, Commander Oh reported. Vorthak personnel are showing remarkable enthusiasm for learning about human capabilities. Several of their commanders have requested immediate meetings to discuss closer cooperation. Dr. Shin Hee-young had completed her analysis of Vorthak technology and found it even more primitive than expected. Their weapon systems are actually quite crude, she reported. Most of their success came from attacking species that were even less advanced than they are. Against human technology, they would be completely helpless. But the most important report came from General Han Yun-ji's Marine divisions. All human colonies that were attacked by the Vorthak have been secured, the general announced. Reparations are being delivered ahead of schedule. The Vorthak seem very eager to make amends for their previous actions. Throughout the galaxy, word of what had happened was spreading faster than light-speed communication. Every alien species was learning the same lesson. Humans were not the peaceful, weak creatures they had appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous. Predators who chose to be peaceful, but could become terrifying when that choice was taken away from them. Ambassador Keth sent an urgent message to all reptilian colonies. Never, under any circumstances, attack a human diplomat. If a human is smiling after you've threatened them, evacuate immediately and pray to whatever gods you believe in. Hive Speaker Zix's report to the collective was even more blunt. Humans have been conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history while maintaining the appearance of harmless explorers. They are apex predators who prefer not to hunt. Do not give them a reason to change their minds. The signing ceremony itself was remarkably brief. Grix's claw barely managed to form his signature on the document before he collapsed back into his chair. Defeated and broken. Excellent, Tae-ho said warmly, as if he had just concluded a pleasant business meeting. I think this marks the beginning of a wonderful relationship between our peoples. Admiral Bae stepped forward with another document. War Commander, this contains the details of our cultural exchange program. Human observers will be stationed throughout your territory to help facilitate better understanding between our species. The observers, of course, would be intelligence operatives and military advisors who would ensure that the Vorthak never again threatened human interests. But Tae-ho didn't mention that part. You'll find our people very helpful, Tae-ho continued. They're experts in conflict resolution, resource management, and peaceful coexistence. I'm sure they'll have many valuable suggestions for improving Vorthak society. Park So-jin handed Grix a communication device. This will allow you to contact our coordination center at any time. We want to make sure that any questions or concerns are addressed immediately. What she didn't say was that the device would also monitor all Vorthak communications and provide humans with real-time intelligence about any potential threats, Captain. Do-hyun presented the final document, a complete reorganization of Vorthak military structure that would integrate human advisors at every level. This will help prevent any unfortunate misunderstandings in the future. he explained with that same pleasant smile. As the ceremony concluded, Taeho stood and extended his hand to Grix. "War Commander, I want you to know that there are no hard feelings about yesterday's incident. We understand that different cultures express themselves in different ways." Grix stared at the offered hand as if it were a venomous snake. But with human ships surrounding his empire and human operatives throughout his territory, he had no choice but to accept it. "However," Taeho continued, his grip surprisingly strong, "I do hope this experience has been educational for you. You see, humans value peace above all things. We smile because we choose to be happy. We negotiate because we prefer cooperation to conflict." His smile grew brighter, and his voice remained perfectly gentle. "But when someone strikes a human diplomat, they learn something very important about our species. They learn that our politeness was never weakness, our patience was never submission, and our smiles were never surrender." He released Grix's claw and stepped back. "They learn that we were simply choosing to be peaceful, and that when that choice is taken away from us, we become something very different indeed." The aftermath of the negotiations spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Every species that had ever considered humans to be weak prey animals suddenly found themselves re-evaluating that assessment. Trade agreements with human colonies became much more favorable to human interests. Territorial disputes involving human settlements were resolved with remarkable speed and generosity. Pirates and raiders who had been targeting human shipping suddenly found other safer prey. And throughout it all, human diplomats continued to smile their gentle, friendly smiles. 6 months later, Ambassador Park Young-soo arrived at a new negotiation involving a territorial dispute between humans and the aggressive Kardak Confederacy. The Kardak had been making increasingly hostile demands, backed by threats of military action. Young-soo walked into the conference room with the same pleasant demeanor that Taeho had displayed at Harmony's Edge. He greeted everyone warmly, complimented the refreshments, and began the negotiations with his characteristic gentle smile. The Kardak delegation had clearly heard stories about what had happened to the Vorthak. Their demands became more reasonable with each passing hour. By the end of the first day, they were practically begging to sign a fair and equitable agreement. "Ambassador," the Kardak leader said nervously, "we want you to know that we have the utmost respect for human diplomatic traditions. We would never dream of being undiplomatic." Young-soo's smile brightened considerably. "How wonderful. I'm so glad we understand each other. My colleague Ambassador Taeho always says that the best negotiations are the ones where everyone goes home happy." The Kardak leader nodded frantically. "Yes, absolutely. Happy is good, very good. We want everyone to be happy." And so the galaxy learned a new rule: when a human diplomat smiles, you smile back. You negotiate in good faith. You show respect and courtesy. Because if you don't, you might discover that the most terrifying thing in the universe isn't a monster with fangs and claws. It's a human who has stopped smiling. But as long as the galaxy remembered that lesson, human diplomats would continue to wear their gentle, peaceful smiles. They would continue to choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over violence, and peace over war. And everyone would be much, much happier that way. In his office on Earth, Ambassador Kim Taeho read reports from diplomats throughout human space. Every negotiation was proceeding smoothly. Every agreement was fair and reasonable. Every alien species was showing remarkable enthusiasm for peaceful cooperation with humanity. He smiled as he filed the reports away. It was the same gentle, warm smile he had always worn. After all, humans preferred to be peaceful. They just wanted to make sure that everyone else preferred it too. Morning came to Harmony's Edge, but the Vorthak delegation had not slept. They had spent the night watching their sensors as more and more human ships appeared around the station. Ships that seemed to materialize out of empty space. Ships that didn't match any known human designs. Ships that moved in perfect coordination as if controlled by a single mind. War Commander Grix stood at the window of his quarters, staring out at the growing fleet. His warriors had reported similar appearances throughout Vorthak space. Human vessels were showing up everywhere, always in the same pattern. They would appear without warning, take up positions around Vorthak ships and stations, and then simply wait. They weren't attacking. They weren't even making threats. They were just watching, and every single one of them was broadcasting the same polite message. Greetings from Ambassador Kim Taeho. We hope you enjoy learning about human culture. The worst part was the crews. Whenever the Vorthak tried to communicate with the human ships, they were met with friendly faces and bright smiles. The humans acted as if this was all perfectly normal, as if surrounding an empire with warships was just another form of cultural exchange. A soft chime announced the arrival of a new ship at Harmony's Edge. Grix watched as an elegant, white vessel docked at the station's main port. It was clearly marked as a medical ship, with red crosses painted on its hull and peaceful design that suggested healing rather than warfare, but Grix was beginning to learn that human appearances could be very deceiving. The ship's name was visible on its side, Mercy's Grace. And according to the station's announcement system, it carried Fleet Admiral Bei Sung Min, who had come to ensure the health and safety of all diplomatic personnel. An hour later, Grix found himself back in the conference room, facing Ambassador Kim Tae-ho across the negotiating table. The human's wounds from the previous night had been carefully treated, leaving only small bandages on his cheek. His smile was as bright and friendly as ever, but everything else had changed. The other alien delegations were gone. Even the station's neutral staff seemed nervous and eager to please. And through the room's large windows, the growing human fleet was clearly visible, turning what had been empty space into a showcase of military power. "War Commander," Tae-ho said pleasantly, "I hope you slept well. I know the arrival of so many ships might have caused some excitement." Fleet Admiral Bei sat beside Tae-ho, a stern woman in a crisp military uniform. She had introduced herself as being deeply concerned about the safety of diplomatic personnel and personally interested in ensuring that all parties feel secure during these important discussions. Captain Do-hyun stood behind them, no longer pretending to be just a simple escort. His uniform now displayed the insignia of human special forces, and his casual demeanor had been replaced by the focused alertness of a professional soldier. Park So-jin was at her usual place, but she too had dropped her diplomatic disguise. Her tablet had been replaced by an advanced computer system, and her polite aide's clothing had given way to the practical outfit of a military intelligence officer. "I have a new proposal for today's negotiations," Tae-ho continued, his smile growing brighter. "I think you'll find it much more straightforward than our previous discussions." Grix tried to maintain his aggressive posture, but he was clearly shaken. "What kind of proposal?" Tae-ho gestured toward a large screen that had been installed in the room overnight. It lit up to show a map of Vorthak space with hundreds of red dots scattered throughout their territory. "Each of those dots represents a human ship currently visiting your empire," Tae-ho explained cheerfully. "We've been conducting an extensive cultural exchange program for the past several months. Our people have been learning so much about Vorthak society." Admiral Bei touched a control and the display zoomed in on one of the red dots. It showed a Vorthak military base surrounded by human vessels that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. "This is Base Korvac 7, Admiral Bei said in a calm, professional voice. "One of your most heavily defended installations. As you can see, our cultural exchange team has taken a particular interest in your military architecture." Another section of the map lit up, showing Vorthak patrol routes that were now shadowed by human ships. "Your fleet movements have been absolutely fascinating to observe," So-jin added, looking up from her computer. "We've learned so much about Vorthak tactical doctrine. Did you know that your ships follow extremely predictable patterns? We've been able to map every single one of your patrol routes, supply lines, and communication networks." Grix's face had gone pale beneath his gray skin. "This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected your ships." Captain Do-hyun smiled for the first time since Grix had met him. It was not a pleasant expression. "War Commander, human technology is quite a bit more advanced than you realized. We've been walking through your territory for months. Sometimes we've been walking through your own ships." The screen changed again, this time showing the interior of a Vorthak vessel. Human figures in stealth suits moved through the corridors like ghosts, invisible to the alien crew around them. "Commander Oh Ji-won and her stealth corps have been particularly impressed with your ship designs," Tae-ho said conversationally, though they did notice several significant weaknesses in your security systems. Grix stood up abruptly, his claws scraping against the table. "This is an act of war." Tae-ho's smile became absolutely radiant. "Oh no, War Commander. This is diplomacy. You see, we wanted to make sure we fully understood your culture before we made any agreements." Knowledge is so important in negotiations, don't you think? Admiral Bay activated another display, this one showing detailed analysis of Vorthak weapons, ships, and military capabilities. Dr. Shin Hee-young and our research teams have been studying your technology very carefully. We've developed countermeasures for every weapon system in your arsenal. We've also identified the critical weakness in your main ship designs. It's quite interesting, actually, Sojin added, as if discussing the weather. Your empire looks very impressive from the outside, but once you understand how it really works, it's surprisingly fragile. Like a house of cards. Grix looked around the room desperately as if seeking an escape route, but Captain Do-hyun was blocking the main exit, and Admiral Bay's people had quietly taken positions at every other door. Now then, Taeho said, pulling out a fresh tablet. Let me present our revised proposal for these negotiations. The screen changed one final time, showing a simple document with clear, straightforward terms. First, Taeho read, the Vorthak Empire will immediately cease all aggressive actions against human colonies and shipping. Second, all human prisoners currently held by the Vorthak will be released unharmed and returned to human space. Third, the Vorthak Empire will pay reparations for damages caused during their raids on human territory. Fourth, War Commander Grix will formally apologize for his assault on a human diplomat during peace negotiations. And fifth, Taeho's smile became absolutely brilliant. The Vorthak Empire will participate in an extended cultural exchange program, during which human observers will be stationed throughout Vorthak space to ensure compliance with these terms. Grix's voice was barely a whisper. And if we refuse? Taeho looked genuinely surprised by the question. Refuse, War Commander? Why would you refuse? This is such a generous offer. Admiral Bay leaned forward slightly. Of course, if you do prefer to continue your current approach to diplomacy, we would be happy to demonstrate more of our culture. For instance, we could show you what happens when humans stop smiling. On the screen, the display shifted to show human military formations moving into attack positions around every major Vorthak installation. The message was clear. The humans had been playing with them. The real demonstration of power was just beginning. Captain Do-hyun's voice was soft but carried clearly through the room. Commander Oh-ji-won reports that her teams are in position throughout your empire. Dr. Shin's people have finished their analysis of your critical systems, and Admiral Choi's fleet is ready to begin the educational portion of our cultural exchange. Taeho set down his tablet and folded his hands peacefully in front of him. His smile was as gentle and friendly as it had been on the first day. So, War Commander, he said in his pleasant, diplomatic voice, shall we proceed with the signing ceremony? I think you'll find our terms very reasonable, especially considering the educational value of the cultural exchange program we're offering. Grix looked at the human faces around him. Every one of them was smiling. Every one of them looked perfectly pleasant and reasonable, and every one of them was absolutely terrifying. For the first time in his life, War Commander Grix, veteran of 100 battles and conqueror of a dozen species, realized that he was completely and utterly outmatched. The humans had never been prey. They had been predators wearing the mask of peaceful diplomats, and now the mask was coming off. Ambassador Kim Taeho walked back to his quarters with that same terrifying smile still on his face. Blood had dried on his cheek, but he made no effort to clean it. Park So-jin and Captain Lee Do-hyun followed closely behind him, both looking like hunters who had just caught the scent of prey. Behind them, the diplomatic dinner had completely fallen apart. Ambassador Keth was already on his ship, sending urgent messages to his government. Hive Speaker Zix had activated every communication device the collective possessed. Even species that had never dealt with humans before were suddenly very interested in leaving the station. Only the Vorthak delegation remained, and they were beginning to realize that something was very wrong. In his quarters, Taeho sat down at his desk and activated his personal communication system. The first call he made was to Admiral Choi Min-ho of the Human Defense Fleet. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, showing a stern man with silver hair and sharp eyes. He took one look at Taeho's bloodied face and terrifying smile, and his expression immediately hardened. Ambassador, the Admiral said quietly. What happened? Admiral, Taeho replied in his gentle voice. I'm afraid the Vorthak have struck a human diplomat during peace negotiations. War Commander Grix became frustrated with our discussions and decided to express his feelings physically. Admiral Choi was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I see. And what is your assessment of the situation? Taeho's smile grew even brighter. I believe the Vorthak delegation would benefit greatly from a demonstration of human culture. Perhaps you could arrange for some of our ships to visit their territory? I think a cultural exchange program would be very educational for everyone involved. Consider it done, the Admiral said grimly. How many ships would you recommend for this cultural exchange? Oh, I think all of them would be appropriate for such an important educational opportunity. The Admiral's own smile was cold and sharp. All of them. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We wouldn't want to seem unwelcoming to our new friends. The second call was to Director Yoon Jae-sung of Human Intelligence. The director was a quiet woman who rarely smiled, but when she saw Taeho's face, her lips curved upward in a way that would have given nightmares to anyone who understood what it meant. Director, Taeho said pleasantly, it seems our intelligence-gathering efforts regarding the Vorthak Empire will need to move to the next phase. They've demonstrated a fascinating approach to diplomatic protocol. How fascinating, Director Yoon replied. I assume you'll want a comprehensive analysis of their military capabilities, political structure, and psychological profiles? That would be lovely. Also, I think it might be time to activate some of our more specialized assets. The ones we've been saving for special occasions. The ones that have been studying Vorthak culture from the inside. Taeho's smile became positively radiant. Exactly those ones. The third call was to General Han Eun-ji of the Colonial Marines. The general was a tough woman who had spent her career protecting human colonies from various threats. When she saw the dried blood on Taeho's face, her expression became absolutely murderous. General, Taeho said in his most polite voice, I'm calling to inform you that the Vorthak delegation has decided to demonstrate their cultural values by striking a human diplomat. I thought you should know given your interest in protecting human civilians. General Han's voice was like ice. Ambassador, are you telling me that these creatures attacked you during peace talks? Indeed they did. Most educational. I think our Marines would find their approach to conflict resolution quite interesting. Perhaps some of our people could visit Vorthak space to learn more about their methods. I'll have 3 divisions ready to deploy within the hour, the general said. Should I prepare for extended cultural exchanges? I think that would be wise. We want to make sure we fully understand their perspective. As Taeho ended his calls, So-jin was busy at her own communication station. But she wasn't calling other government officials. She was sending coded messages to human agents throughout the galaxy, people who had been quietly watching and waiting for years. The sleeping giant protocol is now active, she said into her secure communicator. All assets are to reveal themselves and await further instructions. Captain Do-hyun was making his own preparations. His ship, the Soul's Pride, had been disguised as a simple diplomatic escort vessel. But now it was dropping its camouflage and revealing the advanced weapon systems hidden beneath its peaceful exterior. More importantly, Do-hyun was signaling to other human ships that had been hiding in the area. Ships that weren't supposed to exist. Ships that had been watching the Vorthak Empire for months, learning everything there was to know about their technology, their tactics, and their weaknesses. All across human space, something remarkable was happening. Every human military installation received the same message. Every human colony ship changed course toward Vorthak territory. Every human merchant vessel suddenly revealed itself to be something much more dangerous. The scattered, peaceful species that everyone thought they knew was transforming into something unified and terrifying. And they were all moving toward the same target. On Harmony's edge, the remaining alien diplomats who hadn't already fled were sending frantic messages to their governments. The content was always the same. The human is still smiling. This is very bad. We need to leave immediately. Ambassador Keth managed to get through to his government just before his ship jumped to hyperspace. The humans aren't what we thought, he reported urgently. They've been pretending to be weak. The diplomat is still smiling after being attacked. In our culture, that means someone is about to die very badly. Hive speaker Zix's report to the collective was even more disturbing. Analysis indicates that human peaceful behavior was calculated deception. Striking their diplomat appears to have activated some kind of species-wide response pattern. Recommend immediate withdrawal from all areas near human or Vorthak space. In the Vorthak quarters, War Commander Grix was beginning to understand that he had made a serious mistake. His warriors, who had never shown fear in their lives, were nervously checking their weapons and looking toward the exits. "Commander," one of them said quietly, "the other aliens are all leaving, even the ones who aren't involved in these talks. And the human ship that brought their diplomat," another added. "It's not the same ship anymore. It's grown weapons that weren't there before." Grix stared out the window at the stars, trying to understand what was happening. In the distance, he could see lights moving in patterns that hadn't been there an hour ago. Ships were arriving, but they weren't showing up on any sensors. "Sir," his communications officer said in a shaky voice, "we're receiving reports from our home territory. Human ships are appearing everywhere. They're not attacking, but they're just watching. And sir, they're all broadcasting the same message." "What message?" Grix demanded. The officer's voice cracked as he read from his screen. "They're saying, 'Greetings from Ambassador Kim Tae-ho. We hope you enjoy learning about human culture.'" Meanwhile, in his quarters, Tae-ho was calmly cleaning the dried blood from his cheek. His smile had returned to its normal, gentle warmth, but there was something different about his eyes. Something that suggested he was looking forward to the next phase of negotiations. So-jin entered the room carrying a medical kit. "Sir, we should treat those wounds properly." "Of course," Tae-ho replied pleasantly. "We want to look our best for tomorrow's discussions. I have a feeling they're going to be much more productive than today's." Do-hyun appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the Soul's Pride is fully operational and ready for action. We also have confirmation that Fleet Admiral Bae Sung-min is en route with the humanitarian vessel Mercy's Grace." Tae-ho's smile brightened. "Excellent. I'm sure the Admiral will want to ensure that all diplomats on this station are safe and healthy. It would be terrible if anyone else got hurt during these delicate negotiations." As night fell on Harmony's edge, the Vorthak delegation huddled in their quarters, finally beginning to understand what they had unleashed. Outside their windows, more and more lights appeared in the darkness. Human ships dropping their disguises and revealing themselves for what they truly were. And somewhere in the diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Kim Tae-ho sat peacefully in his chair, reading a book of poetry and smiling that gentle, terrifying smile. The prey had revealed itself to be the predator, and the predator was still smiling. The second day of negotiations was worse than the first. War Commander Grix arrived at the conference table with even more demands than before. He wanted not just 3 star systems, but 5. He wanted all human ships to carry Vorthak flags. He wanted human colonies to send their strongest young people to serve in Vorthak armies. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho listened to each demand with the same patient smile. He took careful notes and asked polite questions. When Grix finished speaking, Tae-ho nodded thoughtfully. "These are certainly comprehensive proposals," Tae-ho said. "However, I think there might be some misunderstandings about human society. You see, we don't actually force our young people to join armies. They choose their own paths in life." Grix's eyes narrowed. "Choice is weakness. The strong decide for the weak. That is the natural order. Perhaps in your culture," Tae-ho replied gently. "But humans have found that people work better when they believe in what they're doing. Free choice makes us stronger, not weaker." "Lies," Grix roared. "Your colonies were defenseless against our raids. Your ships ran away instead of fighting. You are a race of cowards who hide behind words." Park So-jin tensed in her chair, but Tae-ho's smile only grew brighter. "I can understand why you might think that. After all, we did choose to request these peace talks instead of responding with force." Captain Lee Do-hyun shifted slightly, his hand moving closer to his sidearm. Around the table, other alien diplomats watched the exchange with growing unease. Ambassador Keth kept glancing toward the exits. Hive Speaker Zix had already moved her chair back from the table. The third day was the worst yet. Grix had apparently decided that the humans were too weak to deserve respect. He interrupted Tae-ho constantly. He mocked human gifts and called human culture the whimpering of prey animals. Through it all, Tae-ho maintained his calm demeanor. He answered every insult with patience. He met every threat with understanding. His smile never faltered, not even when Grix began describing in detail what would happen to human colonies if they refused to surrender. "Your children will serve our warriors," Grix said with obvious pleasure. "Your artists will create monuments to Vorthak victories. Your scientists will build weapons for the Empire. And those who refuse will learn what happens to those who defy the Vorthak. Taeho nodded as if he were listening to a weather report. That sounds like it would be very unpleasant for everyone involved. Are you certain there isn't a more mutually beneficial arrangement we could explore? The other Vorthak delegates laughed harshly at this response. To them, Taeho's politeness was proof of human weakness. They began making their own insulting comments, each trying to outdo the others. But some of the non-human diplomats had begun to look very nervous indeed. Ambassador Keth was now openly sweating despite the cool temperature in the room. Two of the smaller delegations had quietly excused themselves and left the station entirely. On the evening of the third day, the station's administrator hosted a formal dinner for all the delegates. It was supposed to be a neutral social gathering, a chance for different species to interact informally and perhaps find common ground. The dinner was held in the station's largest room, with tables arranged in a circle around a central area where entertainers from various cultures performed. The food was carefully prepared to be safe for all the different alien biologies represented. Taeho sat at the main table with the other senior diplomats. He chatted pleasantly with everyone around him, asking about their homeworlds and families. He complimented the food and praised the entertainment. He was, as always, the perfect gentleman. War Commander Grick sat directly across from him, growing more and more frustrated with each passing minute. He had spent 3 days trying to intimidate this human, and the man just kept smiling. It was driving Grix crazy. "Tell me, human," Grix said loudly, interrupting a conversation about art. "What do you do when someone threatens your family?" Taeho turned to face him with genuine interest. "That's a very good question, War Commander. In human culture, we believe that family is the most important thing in the universe. We would do anything to protect those we love. Then why do you smile when I threaten your colonies? Are they not your family?" Taeho considered this carefully. "All humans are indeed our family in a way. And you're right to question my smile. It probably does seem strange to you." "It seems weak," Grix snarled. "A strong leader would be angry. A strong leader would threaten me back. But you just sit there smiling like a fool." "I suppose I do smile a lot," Taeho admitted. "It's a habit of mine. My mother always told me that a smile costs nothing but can be worth everything." Grix stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire room fell silent. Even the entertainers stopped their performance. "I am tired of your smiles, human," Grix declared. "I am tired of your weakness. I am tired of pretending that your species deserves respect." Taeho looked up at him calmly. "I'm sorry you feel that way, War Commander. Is there something I can do to make this easier for you?" That was the final straw. In front of representatives from 12 different species, War Commander Grix raised his massive clawed hand and struck Ambassador Kim Taeho across the face. The blow was strong enough to knock Taeho from his chair. Blood ran down his cheek from where Grix's claws had torn the skin. The sound of the impact echoed through the absolutely silent room. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Grix's heavy breathing as he stood over the fallen human diplomat. Then Taeho slowly pushed himself back to his feet. He reached up and gently touched the wounds on his cheek, looking at the blood on his fingers with mild interest. And then he smiled. It was not the same gentle smile he had worn for 3 days. This smile was different. It was wider, brighter, and somehow it was absolutely terrifying. Ambassador Keth immediately stood and began backing toward the exit. "I need to contact my government," he said in a shaky voice. Right now, Hive Speaker Zix was already at the door. "The collective must be informed immediately," she buzzed in panic. Several other delegations suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Within minutes, half the room had emptied. But Taeho just stood there, blood still running down his face, smiling that terrible smile. "War Commander," he said in the same gentle voice he had used all week, "you have just made a very interesting diplomatic choice." Park So-jin was already reaching for her emergency communicator. Captain Lee Do-hyun had his hand on his weapon, but Taeho raised one hand to stop them both. "There's no rush," he said softly. "We have all the time in the world." Grix suddenly realized that something had changed. The human was still smiling, but everything else was different. The remaining alien diplomats were looking at him with something like pity. His own warriors seemed nervous for the first time in their lives. "You struck a human diplomat during peace negotiations. Taeho continued in that same gentle tone. I'm sure your people are very proud of your strength. I'm equally sure that my people will be very interested to hear about this. Taeho walked calmly toward the exit, still smiling that brilliant, terrible smile. Sojin and Dohyun followed him closely. At the door, Taeho paused and turned back to face Grix one more time. I need to make a few calls home, he said pleasantly. I do hope you'll excuse me. Family business, you understand. As the human delegation left the room, War Commander Grix felt something he had never experienced before in his long life of conquest and violence. He felt afraid, and somewhere deep in his warrior's heart, he knew that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The space station called Harmony's Edge floated quietly in the darkness between star systems. It was built for one purpose, to host meetings between different alien races when they needed to talk instead of fight. Today it would host the most important meeting in years. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho stepped off his transport ship with a gentle smile on his face. He was a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. Behind him walked his aide, Park So-jin, a sharp woman who carried herself like a soldier but dressed like a diplomat. Captain Lee Do-hyun followed them, his hand resting casually near his weapon but his face calm and friendly. The human delegation moved through the station's corridors with quiet confidence. Other aliens stopped to stare at them. Humans were still new to most of the galaxy. Many species had heard stories about them, but few had seen them up close. Remember, Taeho said softly to his companions, we are here to make peace, not to prove anything. Keep your smiles warm and your words gentle. Sojin nodded, though her eyes constantly scanned the area around them. Do-hyun simply grunted his agreement. Both knew that Taeho was the best diplomat humanity had ever produced. In 30 years of service, he had never lost his temper, never raised his voice, and never stopped smiling. The main conference room was huge, with a round table in the center. Representatives from 12 different species sat around it, but everyone's attention focused on the two main groups. On one side sat the human delegation. On the other side sat the Vorthak Empire's representatives. The Vorthak were large, muscular creatures with thick gray skin and sharp claws. They wore heavy armor even during peace talks. Their leader, War Commander Grix, was the biggest of them all. His scarred face and cold eyes showed that he had spent his life fighting and killing. Grix looked at the humans with obvious disgust. To him, they looked weak and soft. Their clothes were simple and peaceful. They carried no visible weapons. Worst of all, they smiled constantly. In Vorthak culture, smiling meant fear or submission. So these are the famous humans, Grix said in a voice like grinding metal. They look even weaker than I expected. Taeho's smile grew a little brighter. War Commander Grix, it is an honor to meet you. We bring greetings from all human colonies and hope for a peaceful future between our peoples. The other alien diplomats watched nervously. They had all heard about the Vorthak attacks on human outer colonies. For 6 months, Vorthak ships had been raiding human settlements, testing how humans would respond. So far, the humans had only defended themselves and asked for talks. Ambassador Keth, a tall reptilian creature with golden scales, leaned forward with interest. His people had dealt with humans before. He knew something that the Vorthak did not. Humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. The opening ceremony began with each delegation presenting gifts. The Vorthak brought weapons and trophies from their recent battles. Grix personally placed a necklace made from the bones of enemies on the table. These are from our latest victories, Grix announced proudly. We want everyone to remember that the Vorthak are the strongest race in this galaxy. When it was their turn, the humans presented very different gifts. Taeho carefully placed a small sculpture on the table. It was made from some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from within. This represents the first moment humans looked up at the stars from our home world, Taeho explained. It reminds us that we are all travelers in the same universe. Sojin added a collection of books translated into different alien languages. These contain our history, our poetry, and our dreams. We believe that understanding each other is the first step toward peace. Do-hyun contributed a simple wooden box. This contains seeds from Earth, our homeworld. If planted in suitable soil, they will grow into trees that can live for thousands of years. We hope they will remind future generations of the friendship we build here today. The contrast could not have been greater. The Vorthak brought death and conquest. The humans brought life and hope. Grix looked at the human gifts with confusion and then anger. What kind of warriors are you? Where are your weapons? Where are your battle trophies? Teho's smile never wavered. We are not warriors, War Commander. We are builders, dreamers, and explorers. We prefer to create rather than destroy. Then you are weak, Grix declared. The galaxy belongs to the strong. The weak exist only to serve or be consumed. That is certainly one way to view the universe, Teho replied gently. We prefer to think that the galaxy is large enough for all of us to find our own paths. The formal negotiations began immediately after the ceremony. Grix demanded that humans give up 3 entire star systems to the Vorthak Empire. He called it tribute for allowing humans to exist in Vorthak space. Teho listened carefully to every demand. His smile grew warmer as the demands became more outrageous. He took notes on a simple tablet and nodded thoughtfully at each point. I understand your position, Teho said when Grix finished. However, those star systems contain several billion human colonists. Perhaps we could discuss a different arrangement. The colonists can serve the Empire or be removed, Grix replied coldly. Those are the only choices. Sojin's hand moved slightly toward her tablet, but Teho gave her a tiny shake of his head. Not yet. His smile remained bright and friendly. That would be difficult for us to accept, Teho said. Let me propose an alternative. What if we establish joint trading posts in neutral space? Both our peoples could benefit from increased commerce. Grix slammed his fist on the table. We are not merchants. We are conquerors. You will submit or be destroyed. The other alien diplomats shifted nervously in their seats. Ambassador Keth began to look worried. Hive Speaker Zix, an insectoid creature from the collective, started moving toward the exit, but Teho just smiled more broadly. I can see this is very important to you, War Commander. Perhaps we should take a break for today and continue tomorrow? Sometimes a good night's rest can bring fresh perspectives to difficult problems. As the delegates filed out of the conference room, Teho walked calmly back to his quarters. Sojin and Dohyun followed closely behind him. Sir, Sojin said quietly, his demands are completely unreasonable. He's not negotiating in good faith. He's testing us, Dohyun added, seeing how far he can push before we break. Teho paused at the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. His reflection showed the same gentle smile he had worn all day. Let him test, Teho said softly. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Neither Sojin nor Dohyun understood what he meant, but both recognized the tone in his voice. They had heard it before, during other negotiations that had not gone as planned. It was the voice of a man who was about to teach someone else a very important lesson. Outside the window, stars twinkled peacefully in the darkness. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed that some of those stars seemed to be moving.